A little recap first. In one of my streams a while ago, we agreed that the Victorian era was not exactly the safest and most normal time. You were better off bunkering yourself up in your home to avoid werewolves, dancing plagues, serial killers, and gangs with weird names that could pass on for a metal band. But what else should one fear living in the 1800s? Apparently a flock of tens of thousands of sheep running through the country devastating everything that stands in their path, like the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Just more floofy. Wild times, I tell you. What happened on the evening of November 3rd, 1888, could not have been predicted by people, and understandably so, couldn't have been prevented. This is the story of the Great Sheep Panic in Oxfordshire, England. On Saturday around 8 p.m, it was just another peaceful evening in the field, where sheep were minding their business. Nothing out of the ordinary. Until all at once, tens of thousands of sheep in several major sheep breeding districts of Redden, on about a 200 square miles area, were taken by a sudden fright. Went completely mad, jumping their hurdles, escaping from fields, running in every possible direction, fleeing for their lives. 2 local farmers described the incident and its aftermath in a letter to the editor of Hardwick's Science Gossip magazine. Quote, "Early on Sunday morning, the shepherds found the animals under hedges and in the roads, panting as if they had been terror-stricken. The extent of the occurrence may be judged when we mention that every large farmer from Wallingford, on the one hand, to Twyford on the other, has reported that his sheep were similarly frightened, and it is also noteworthy that, with 2 or 3 exceptions, the hill country north of the Thames seems to have been principally affected. We have not heard, nor can any of the farmers give any reasonable explanation of the facts we have described." End quote. Safe to say, it was complete madness. People started searching for the source of the night of horrified sheep immediately, trying to explain the bizarre phenomenon. It was only reasonable to first look at any seismological and meteorological conditions that night, but nothing really stood out. Nobody felt any earthquake, and the weather wasn't especially bad on November 3rd, though it was a, quote, very dark night, with a possibility of a few lightning flashes. But was it enough to trigger thousands of sheep all at once? Listen, I don't have any beef with sheep, figuratively, but the popular opinion is that these animals are not the sharpest tool in the shed, not the brightest bulb in a bunch, not the floofiest Pomeranian. You get the... Okay, I'm so lost. At first glance, people tend to conclude that it was the effect of the so-called non-questioning herd mentality of sheep. But even if that was the source, it would still be a domino effect, where one flock gets alarmed, which spreads and causes other flocks to follow the suit. That night, however, all of them were affected by whatever caused the panic simultaneously. To be clear, sheep won't be winning a Nobel or Pulitzer Prize anytime soon, but nonetheless, they aren't just your regular idiots. Although none of the immediate natural phenomena pointed at the source of sheep panic, contemporary natural scientists noticed that history quotes a lot of extraordinary astronomical occurrences that seemed to happen in Oxfordshire, particularly in November. A record of such incidents was found in the following note from British Rainfall. Quote, "What with the meteor at Wantage, April 9th, 1628. The undermentioned one November 3rd, 1868. The one November 20th, 1887, reported upon by Mr. Fordham, and the sheep panic November 3rd, 1888. It really seems as if the residents in that district in November have exceptional opportunities for meteorological research." End quote. The analysts from the Livestock Journal attempted to divert from the Outerspace influence into a more psychological solution, focusing on the behavioral patterns of the sheep and how easy it is to spook them. They noted that it was most likely the panic contagion of the sheep and a very dark night that are at fault of the bizarre fright outbreak. Quote, "As we believe, the panic is spread by, quote, hearing. Flock M or N is frightened on a very dark night. At once, L and O are disturbed, and the sound of their excitement attracts the attention of K and P, who are simultaneously panic-driven, the distress expanding from one center, as the rings upon the surface of a pond expand from where the stone strikes the center." End quote. But if sheep are that easily frightened and pushed into the panic mode, the massive panic attacks would be more frequent. That was not the case for the sheep in Oxfordshire, aside from those isolated incidents every few years or even decades. I know we're gonna get to this conclusion eventually, so I'ma take one for the team and say it right now. Aliens. Another such incident happened a few years forward, in 1893, in the nearby Berkshire, and it was an equally massive scale of sheep panic, yet again puzzling the local residents. And yet again, the only explanation they were given was that there must have been seismological and meteorological events that triggered the fright to tens of thousands of animals, across hundreds of square kilometers. Quote, "On the night of December 4th, 1893, another very remarkable panic among sheep occurred in the northern and middle parts of Oxfordshire. Individual farmers, on finding the next morning that their sheep had broken out during the night, and observing the condition of the pens and hurdles, as well as of the sheep themselves in some cases, pointed to the fact of the sheep having been severely frightened, naturally concluded that they had been worried by a dog, perhaps by a fox. Others applied to the police. The result of any inquiries made by the police was to elicit the fact that the panic had expanded over a very large tract of the country, and that unless it was allowed that all the dogs and foxes in the district had with concerted action simultaneously arisen and attacked hundreds of flocks on the same night, this attempt to account of the panic would have to be abandoned." End quote. There was no physical proof for an earthquake to have occurred, or any notice of a meteor crash or an odd weather, but the flock farmers started believing it was yet again caused by the mysterious darkness, like the one reported in 1888. You know how some writers like to start their story with a basic, "It was a dark and stormy night." Ha! That's all you've got? Maybe you should be writing pamphlets instead. "It was a very dark and stormy..." Yawn! "It was a dark night, pitch black, charcoal at midnight, blind puppy in a bunker, the kind that would scare the sheep shitless to the point of insanity." Reports from the 1893 incident also line up with the darkness theory, since they state the night became dark around 8 or 9 p.m., meaning around the same time the animals started acting up. The darkness lasted for 30 to 40 minutes, and appeared to be a black cloud, rolling just along the ground northwest to southeast. Researchers concluded that while animals see perfectly well on ordinary dark nights, this situation might have sparked in them a feeling of helplessness, being trapped, while they found themselves overtaken by darkness where they see nothing. This seems like the most logical explanation, as one can never know if they won't give in to insanity, hallucinations, or misidentification when experiencing anomalistic circumstances. Was this such a case, though? How much can we trust the mass hysteria theory? And should we ignore all the other evidence linking the extraordinary astronomical occurrences that, curiously enough, happened right before the great sheep panics throughout decades?